Hello and welcome to this training on how to do an assembly with Assemble. So what's the point of this training? So first of all, it's to learn the overall running order of an assembly. So in other words, what happens at the assembly. Number two, to understand the reasons for the questions. So you're going to be discussing a couple of different questions at an assembly. So it's understanding what is the reason why those questions are chosen. Number three is to understand the reason behind the design. So why is the process the way that it is? Number four is to learn the basic skills for guiding one of these small groups, which I'll talk about later. And number five is about practicing dealing with talkative people and disruptive people during one of these small groups. Okay. So to start with, what is the running order at one of these assemblies? So if we start at the top, people arrive, your volunteers arrive, and they help to set the space up. So imagine you just got there, there's no tables or chairs, there's no kind of paper out, there's no pens, all this kind of thing. All these things need to be set up. And you'll see in the link to this video, there is a checklist of things to do to set up the space properly in that hour. After that hour's finished and the space is all set up, people will start arriving. So this is the time when the assembly is advertised to begin on your flyer. So this is the time when you're meeting and greeting people. You're welcoming them into the space. And you want to make sure that people feel comfortable. You want to make sure that people know where the toilets are, that they know where to grab a cup of tea, a cup of water, and generally they feel welcome in the space. So it's about having a bit of a chit chat with them, introducing them to other people so they can also have a bit of a chit chat. All of this is happening while the room's filling up. What you'll also do is have a couple of people on the door who will be taking people's names when they come in. So you can ask them, have you signed up for the online event? And if they haven't, you can just write down their name and their email and their phone number. That's so that they can stay in touch with your campaign and they can hear about what happens with the results of the assembly. You also want to be putting people's name tags on a bit of tape and putting it on their chest. And this is important so everyone can see who other people are. And I believe that's everything. I guess one more thing to say is that it's good to have one person on the door for the whole event. And that's just to make sure that people who come into the event late can be welcomed, and you can give them a bit of tape with their name on it. And then you can go and sit them at a table where there's not too many people sitting. Okay, next is a bit of a welcome speech. So the person who is hosting the event will just give a run through of what the where all the exits are, you know, toilets, biscuits, that kind of thing. Then you will have a little introductory speech from the candidate who will be welcoming people into the space again, thanking people for coming and explaining why these assemblies are important. And then you can tell people about what questions we're going to be talking about in the meeting, which we'll go on to look at. You can talk about why these questions are chosen. Then you can just add some additional things like if you don't want to have your photo taken, then you can ask people to sit on a certain table just so they can stay out of the photographs and they're not accidentally captured in those. you can explain that the photos and videos are just for social media purposes, just to promote the candidate for their campaign. You can also explain that people are allowed to come and go as they please. You know, it's quite a relaxed event, so you don't want it to feel too stuffy. Okay, so what happens next? You have your first discussion. So all the discussions that happen in these assemblies, they take place in small groups. So what happens is the first couple of questions are introduced. You tell the assembly what they are. Then you split people off into groups of around about 6 or as close to 6 as possible. So the way you do that is you work out roughly how many people are in the room. Then you divide that by 6 and you have the number of groups that you want. And then you just go around the room and say, group 1, group 2, group 3, group 4, group 5, and however many groups you have. And you start again, group 1, group, until everyone has a number and they know which group to go into. The reason why you randomly you give people a number is so that they are not in a group with the people that they came to the assembly with. So you're mixing people up a bit so they all get to know each other. So next is you're actually going into those groups. So this is when everyone splits up into their small tables. So 6 chairs around a table, more or less, and people are discussing the first couple of questions. And there's a guide for each table, or for each small group, who's helping move the discussion around and making sure that no one's speaking too much and everyone's heard, that kind of thing. Next, all the groups come back together and one person from the group stands up and they share roughly in about a minute or two what their group came up with, what ideas their group came up with. Then the same thing happens again. People split back up into the same small groups in the second discussion, and they discuss the final question. And then everyone comes back, and in the same way, they share the ideas that their group came up with. Then there's a process of voting. So everyone in the room will have 3 dots. You can use a pen or a little sticky dot. And they'll get to go up to the list at the front of the room of all the different ideas people have come up with from all of the groups. And they'll get to put 3 dots next to their 3 favorite ideas, so that after that process is done, you can see what are the top 5 favorite ideas that the assembly wants the candidate to do. So there's a little process after that, a little interlude where the host is encouraging people to donate to the campaign and come out volunteering, so come out door knocking or leafleting, that kind of thing. And then after that, it's really a case of just thanking everyone for coming. And if anyone wants to stay and pack everything down, then they're welcome to do so. Okay, so that is the running order. And if it all sounds a bit abstract right now, that's totally fine. We're going to look at it in a bit more detail now. So let's look at the questions. So there's going to be 3 questions for this assembly. The first one, what's good about our area and our country? Second one, what's not so good about our area and our country? And the third one, which is the main question of the assembly, is what do we want our candidate to do? Okay, so you may be wondering, right, so if the main question is what do we want our candidate to do, why are we asking these other 2 questions first? And the reason for that is it's good, it's a helpful exercise for people to build up a bit of a picture of their area and their country. So thinking first about what do they quite like about their area in their country and what don't they like so much about it. So they build up a bit of a picture, and they're hearing other people's perspectives as well. And they're also hearing the perspectives that other groups came up with as well. So this helps them make a bit more of a balanced judgment, so that when they get to the third question, what do we want our candidate to do, their ideas will be a bit more thought through. So there's two discussion groups. You can see here, first discussion and second discussion. Both of them are the same length of time, 30 minutes. But in the first discussion, people are going to be discussing what's good about our area in our country and what's not so good about our area in our country. And then in the second discussion, they're just going to discuss this final question: what do we want our candidate to do? So those are the questions for the assembly, and that's how they're divided into each discussion group. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of an idea about why this process is laid out like it is. If you don't want to know, that's fine. You can just skip over this part. But it might help to give a better overall understanding of the thinking behind the assembly and how it all fits together in one whole. So in the first discussion, as I said, you're discussing ideas in a small group. Then you're expanding outwards and you're sharing your ideas with the whole group. Then you're going back to the small groups to discuss the second question. And this is something I forgot to mention earlier, but you're doing a little mini voting at the end of that second discussion. And then you're coming out to the whole group and everyone's feeding back, they're sharing their ideas from the second discussion group. And then you're narrowing that down even further to a final list that's created through a voting process. So some people find it helpful to think of this like a diamond, as you can see on the screen there. The idea is that you're at a start point, then your ideas are going out, you're broadening your ideas, you're building a picture together, and then you're narrowing them down, and eventually you'll end up with a final list, which is condensed from all of the discussion that's been had. Okay, so yeah, maybe you find that useful, maybe not, that's fine. Okay, so if you are a guide for one of these small groups, in other words, you're the person within this small group of 6 who is the person who is helping to control the conversation a bit, then there's some really important things for you to know. So first of all, your role is to guide the discussion. In other words, you shouldn't be contributing your own opinion or your thoughts or what your preferences are in any way at all to the discussion. So you've got to be neutral, and you're letting the people in your group come up with the ideas, and you're just there to make sure that no one's speaking too much. Okay. Point 2 is that time is very tight. So as I said, you've got half an hour in each small group, and it's really up to you to make sure that you are keeping to the timing. Otherwise, you will run out of time, and you'll have a situation where not everyone has had a chance to speak, which is no good at all. So this is the absolute most common thing that we see with small group guides. is that they ran out of time. So it's a good idea to have your phone with a stopwatch, and you can set it for half an hour. So it's counting down, and in the script, which you'll have a chance to look at later, there's lots of different timings down the side. So you've got to make sure you stick to those timings. So you're doing a bit of a balancing act. You're also guiding the discussion. You're also looking at your stopwatch, making sure you're keeping to time. Okay, point 3 is to allow each person in your small group to only speak for a certain amount of time. That's why you need to roughly, you don't have to look at your stopwatch, but just roughly keep in your head that each person can only speak for a certain amount of time. It's really important to do this, because if one person speaks for 5 minutes, that means everyone else in the group has much less time to speak. So the idea is we want everyone to be heard equally. So there's a couple of different ways that you can stop someone from speaking too much. If someone's going over, the amount of time that they're given, then you can draw a circle like that in front of them, just like that. And in the script, it explains to them beforehand what this means, so they're not confused when you're waving your hand about in front of them. But if they still don't stop when you ask them to round up in this shape, then it's your responsibility to interrupt them politely and just remind them that we need that everyone has only a minute to speak, for example, and everyone needs to keep to the time so that everyone has a chance to be heard, right? And then you can move straight on to the next person. Okay, so it doesn't have to be a big deal at all. So there's some more detail here, which is that in the first discussion, in the first small group discussion, people have 1 minute to speak on each question. In the second small group, people have a bit longer, so they have 2 minutes. So as I said, it's a rough time, so just roughly try and make sure that people stick to that. Okay, so now is the time to read through the small group guide, and you will find a link to that guide in the description to this video, which is below the video. So if you open that up and just have a read through the whole thing, pause this video, take 15 minutes, read through all the instructions, and then come back. Okay, so hopefully you've had a read through the script, and it's somewhat clear to you what you've got to be doing in the small groups. Now's an opportunity to do a bit of role play. So hopefully you're in the room with 1 or 2 or 3, even better, other people. So you can be practicing this role play if you are with them now. If you're not, you can grab your brother or sister or your partner or whoever and just ask if they can role play with you now. So ideally you'll have 3 people for this, but it also works in 2. So the idea is that you're pretending to be a character. So one person is pretending to be the small group guide. So that's the person, as we said, who guides the discussion. The other person is someone in your group. So they're a participant in your group. They're one of the 6 people. And they're talking too much, right? they're talking, they've got 2 minutes to speak, and they're just going on and on and on. So your job is to make sure that they don't go on and on and on, so that no one else has time to speak. And then a third person, if you've got another person in the room, is just watching how you do as a guide and just making some notes so that then they can share these with you afterwards and you can get better and better. Okay. So the idea is to practice in each of these 3 roles so everyone gets a chance. And then you can finish this activity. So if you pause this video once again, take 15 minutes, so that's 5 minutes each to practice. You might get a couple more turns if you're lucky. And then you can come back. Okay, so we're just going to do another role play, and it's exactly the same idea. But this time, instead of someone who talks, who's talking a bit too much, you have in your group someone who's being quite disruptive. So maybe they're not talking, they're not discussing the question. Maybe they're talking about something that's off topic. Maybe they're being rude to another person in the group, or maybe they're being disruptive in some other kind of way. So again, this is really good practice to practice with this scenario, so that if this does happen in the real thing, you're better prepared to deal with this. Okay, so once again, if you stop the video and you take 15 minutes to role play this with the people in the video with you, so you'll get a turn to practice, and then you can come back after. Okay, so hopefully you've had a bit of a chance to practice some of those role play situations. So hopefully you're feeling a bit more comfortable as a small group facilitator. So there's not really much more for me to say, apart from once again reminding you that the small group guide is down below in the description. There's also another guide, which is for the host. So this is a script for the host to follow that leads them through the whole event. And in addition to that, there's another link, which is an event checklist. So this is the checklist to look at before the event. Make sure you printed all the things that you need to print off of there. And then you can use it on the day as well to help you set everything up in the right way as it should. So hopefully you found this training useful, and I'm sure you're going to do a fantastic job on the big day.